Good afternoon, everyone. So, this is this is a crash course, so to speak, right, on various subjects. It was started with economy, then government schemes, right, and environment. You had one session in the morning. Tomorrow again, science and tech and environment, and I will be doing the second session on polity tomorrow. So, what is different about this, right? So, I mean, there are people from outside also here, apart from our own candidates, and there are people who are watching it online as well. So, just to set the context, right? It's not audible. Is it better now? Is it okay now? Yeah? Okay. So, just to set the context, right? So, we have had classes, but for people who are from outside and meaning not part of our academy, and for the online viewers, we do this regularly, right? We do take current affairs as part of our classes itself and try and give the inputs as and when it happen. So, some of it maybe some kind of a revision in that sense. There is enough of online material available, right? So, there is nothing to hide about it. There is nothing to say that, there is no proprietary information to current affairs, right? Current affairs is current affairs. So, no one can claim that I created the current affairs. Current affairs is happening. We are just trying to assimilate it for the purpose of our examination. But there are things which are very important, which you should be aware of. Number one, there are things, because UPSC does come up with questions which are something which sounds innocuous when you read it in the newspaper and you feel, oh, this is, okay, I know this, but this doesn't seem important. I mean, that's the way of testing that UPSC does, where they pick up such schemes or such current affairs issue and, try and test you on that. But be rest assured that they are not going to ask you completely insignificant or, inconsequential current affairs. So, that is not the aim of the UPSC question paper, right? So, in this regard, polity per se, if you see the syllabus of polity, right, you have constitution, you have public policy, you have rights issues, you have governance, you have Panchayati Raj institutions, etc., right? So, this public policy, as I have told you earlier, is primarily revolving around government schemes. So, there is a separate class which Mrs. Sneha has handled, which would have covered the government schemes, right? So, and it would have been in a very structured manner, where you understood what is the objective, what is the overall purpose of the scheme, what is the objectives which are spelled out under the scheme, which is the nodal agency which is responsible for implementing the scheme, as well as the salient features of the scheme, because the questions, if at all, if it is in the prelims, will revolve around that. Constitution, rights issues, we have already covered it in the class. People from outside would have read it as part of their static portion, so there is no need to go about it again in detail. But the list of, let's say, 40, 50 items which we will be discussing today and again in the class tomorrow, right, are those items which are, in our opinion, important current events item, right, current affairs event item, which may be directly asked. See, that's the whole thing which, not just these two classes, but that's something which I've been telling in my classes, in everyone's class we have been saying this. Anything in the current affairs, the UPSC is not going to ask you directly the event that has happened, right? UPSC is not going to ask you how many MLAs were disqualified by the president in the Delhi Legislative Assembly, right? Because that is a current event. 20 MLAs got disqualified. UPSC is going to ask you the constitutional provision with respect to disqualification of members by the president, right? UPSC is not going to ask you, was the opposition successful in bringing the no confidence motion against the government in the Lok Sabha, right? That's the current event. UPSC is going to ask you, what is the procedure for bringing the no confidence motion, whether it can be brought either in the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha or only in the Lok Sabha, what is the minimum strength that is required. So, polity, and when we discuss also, you will find that I am going back to some of the static areas. But that is the nature of testing in polity in the UPSC, because some of it is just plain political. That is not, UPSC is not going to test you on political questions for selecting apolitical civil servants, right? But everything has a constitutional or a legal background to it, and that is what UPSC is going to ask you. There are some areas like, let's say, electoral bonds. We will have a look at it. Electoral bonds is actually a current affairs event which has been recently notified, so there are some criteria which have to be satisfied for the purpose of issue of electoral bonds. So then you need to know what are those criteria, because consider the following statements with respect to electoral bonds, and there could be 2 statements out of the 5 statements that we are seeing. So you should know what are the 5 correct statements with respect to electoral bonds, right? So that's the idea. I'm setting this context because people who have been through my class will understand this context, but as I told you, there are online people, there are people from outside our academy who are also here, so I just thought I'll take this 5 minutes to set the context. And the idea of each of these slides is that, as I told you, there is no one who can claim propriety to current affairs. It's happening around the world in the country, right? And there are enough websites, enough material, including our own steel frame of India, which is trying to put it out to you. The idea of this is that, briefly we will discuss the concept, but the handouts that you will be getting will just be bullet points with respect to those items which we feel may be asked in the UPSC exam. I'm not saying that, that is exactly the statement that is going to come. I mean, if it comes, well and good, great, that's wonderful. But I'm saying the idea is to break it down into bullet points, because UPSC in the preliminary examination is going to ask you only, consider the following statements. They are going to give you 2 or 3 statements. The analysis, see, because any online material is going to combine analysis with facts, right? We will again look at the analysis, but we will do it in the crash course. We will do it for the mains. There is no need to understand the analysis. I'm not saying don't understand. I'm saying, but now, right now, you need to concentrate on the prelims, which is going to test you on facts relating to any aspect. There is no one question which is going to ask you to analyze an issue in the prelims. It's all about facts, right? But never lose sight of the analysis when you're preparing for it now. You don't have to make notes of it now, but read it, because that is what you're going to write in your mains. But right now, the focus should be on prelims, right? Because that's the first step. So that is the idea. So we are going to give you a context, why it is in the news, or when it was in the news, not exactly the month per se, but why it is in the news recently, and what are the related points. It may be related to the current event itself, which you may want to know, or it may be the static portion related to the constitution, which may be asked because this significant event has happened in the recent past. Is that clear to everyone? Yeah? So, and there is no order to it, it's slightly random, but I believe that, at this stage of preparation, you should be able to grasp random stuff, right? So, because you have gone through the order of reading everything, right? So let's start, right? So the first is privilege of legislators. So pardon me for my speed. The idea is, there are around 40, 50 topics which we need to cover. 3 hours today, 3 hours tomorrow, 6 hours, right? These handouts are anyways going to be given to you, right? So don't try and think that, you should memorize these points here in the class itself. And don't feel that, oh, he is rushing to the next slide because I have not yet memorized that, right? So I can't wait till you memorize it here, because you have time to memorize it later, right? So the idea is, as long as you're able to understand it, then fine. You can always revise it once, twice, and get the, get it into your mind so that you'll be able to answer it. Yeah? So privileges, we're all aware, last year there was a question about privileges. One of the essential features of equality is lack of what? Privileges, blah, blah, 4 choices. The answer was privileges, because equality necessarily means lack of privileges. But again, privileges was in news because Karnataka Assembly Speaker ordered imprisonment of 2 journalists. So, then that's an event, as I told you, but the question will be for something related to privileges, if at all, if there is, right? So there are 2 types of privileges. One is the collective privileges, which is enjoyed by the House, and there are individual privileges which are enjoyed by members, right? So that is one classification of privileges which we should be aware of. What are the sources for privileges. The sources of privileges are constitutional provisions directly, 105 and 194, which says no member can be called into question in any court for the way he has spoken or the way he has voted inside the house. That's a privilege which flows directly from the Constitution. Various laws of parliament, CPC, Civil Procedure Code, and various other codes have given some privileges to the members. So that is from the source of the Constitution. Rules of both the houses, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, rules entail certain privileges. Parliamentary conventions, which is flowing from the pre-independence era, right? Because that's what the Constitution says, that till the law is legislated, it will be what the members enjoyed before the commencement of this Constitution. So, and judicial interpretations. Supreme Court has interpreted that privileges means, or rather breach of privilege means obstruction of work. That is the definition that Supreme Court has tried to give. So, privileges flow from all these factors. So, don't think they flow only from the Constitution, don't think they flow only from the Convention, don't think they flow only from the legislation, don't think they flow only from judicial interpretation. They flow from all of them, right? So, that is another thing. And who are the people to whom it is available? It is available to the members of the parliament or the state legislature. It is available to the people who by virtue of the Constitution are entitled to speak inside the houses of parliament or houses of state legislature, which means president, for what he addresses in the house, he cannot be held liable in a court of law. Advocate General in a state legislature or Attorney General, right? And finally, to the people who can publish, who publish the proceedings of the house with the permission of the house. Is that clear? Right? So, is it time for privileges to go? Is a mains question. Right? So, they will not ask you that question in prelims. In prelims, if they want to ask you a question in prelims, they will ask you which are the sources for parliamentary privileges. Then you should know that it flows from all these matters. Right? They may ask you, who are the people, consider the following people who enjoy privileges. Members of parliament, people who can speak in parliament, people who publish the proceedings of the house with the permission of the house. So you should be aware that as per the Constitution, all three of them enjoy privileges. Clear? Right, so guys, the idea is to bring out key 40, 50 topics, right? But what you should take away from this class is not just this handout, but the method of preparation, right? And you still have 2 more months, and 2 months is enough time, right? So, if you have attended classes, if you know what are the topics and all that, if you put your might together and prepare for 2 months fully well, you have a fair chance of clearing the prelims. So, don't think that 2 months is too short a time. As long as you have, it's not that you are going to open the textbook only tomorrow, right? So, 2 months is good enough to prepare, but then you should know exactly how to prepare for the current affairs, right? So, apart from these topics, be it environment, be it economy, in all the areas, apart from the topics, also when you are revising, when you are reading something new, just have this bent of mind that what can be the theoretical portion or the static portion, or how can the question come from this area. I am reading a current affairs event, how can the question be framed from this? What are the possible bullet points that UPSC can ask from this? If you read it with that bent of mind, then chances are that it will register in your mind better, and your chances of getting confused, right, is limited to that extent. Clear? Right? Real estate regulation, right? So this is something which was enacted in 2016 and it came into force in May 2017, right? So while it is 1 year since it came into force, but technically it was not in force when probably the prelims question paper was set last year, right? So then that makes it current affairs even for this year exam, right? It's a very important piece of legislation, right? So what are the salient provisions of, so this is the bullet points. I've tried to list down all the bullet points, but even within this there are few which are very important, few which may not be important. But it's better to know these bullet points, but if you know these bullet points with respect to RERA, that is more than sufficient for prelims. I can challenge, I cannot assure that there will be a question on RERA, but I can challenge that if there is a question on RERA, it can be only from these bullet points, right? So that is the thought that you should have in mind while preparing for each of the topics. So for the first, any project above 500 square meters will have to be compulsorily registered with the Real Estate Regulation Authority. Project developers will be required to deposit 70% of their funds, including land cost, in a separate escrow account to meet the cost of construction. Provision for imprisonment up to 3 years in case of promoters and 1 year in case of agents and buyers for violation of orders of the appellate tribunals. That's a lesser important point. Yeah, the first two are very important. A clear definition of carpet area, and buyers will be charged only for carpet area and not for super built up area, right? Because that was what was happening. So everyone will say 1500 square foot house, right? That is the super built up area. Your carpet area will be 750 square foot, right? So that was what was happening, but now you can charge only for the carpet area. Of course, the prices will be jacked up to the extent, but in any case, appellate tribunals will adjudicate cases. It will regulate both commercial and residential projects and set up state level regulatory authorities to monitor real estate activity. So these are the kind of points which are very important from a UPSC prelims examination point of view. So consider the following enactment of Parliament with respect to RERA, right? Real Estate Regulation Act. That's the trick that UPSC may play with you. It will say that consider the following enactment of the Union Parliament, and then you will be confused. Oh, so does it mean that it, or you know, whether Real Estate Regulation Act. So real estate, whether it is only commercial real estate or residential real estate, the fact is it applies to both as per the Act, right? And the builders would also be responsible for fixing structural defects for 5 years after transferring the property to a buyer. So this is again not so important a point. So what are the important points with respect to RERA? Anything over 500 square meters will have to be registered with the RERA authority, Real Estate Regulatory Authority. 70% of the amount should be deposited before construction by the builders. Builders have to charge the buyers only for carpet area and not for super built up area, and this is an act which is applicable to both commercial as well as residential real estate. Right? These are the salient features which you should be aware of from a preliminary examination point of view. Clear? Right? So that is with respect to RERA. Right? So the NALSA is a 1987 Act. There was a judgment in 2012 and there was a question in 2013 prelims with respect to NALSA. But there is a new facility called Legal Assistance Establishment or Nyaya Sanyog. It will cater to poor litigants and the family of under trials languishing in jails to get quick access to the justice. See, please remember, there are two types of questions that are going to be asked in your prelims, even with respect to current affairs, right? So there are questions where 3 statements are given and you are asked to pick the combination, whether 1 is right, 2 is right, or 1, 2 and 3 is right. So such type of questions, in my view, are slightly easier because you can eliminate 2 choices comfortably. So the probability of getting the answer right comes to 50%, right? But if it is a question which just gives 4 statements and asks you to pick 1, and if you don't know the answer, then the probability of you getting it right is 25%, right? So but there are enough number of questions overall that are going to be pick only the one choice, either A or B or C or D, not a combination of statements. And so for that, you will have to be clear, and that is why in current affairs schemes and all, we had listed down all the objectives. Don't feel bored and just read the purpose and the authority and finish that booklet. That's not going to serve your purpose. You'll have to take that effort and read the objectives. Because UPSC of late has been asking 2 objectives out of the 4 objectives. Are asking 2 objectives from this scheme and 2 objectives from some other scheme and asking whether all 4 are right. then you should know which scheme has what objective. At least you should be able to relate to it. So, what is legal assist? What is Nyaya Sanyog? And they may give you 4 options. Then you should be aware that Nyaya Sanyog is to cater to poor litigants and the families of under trials languishing in jails to get quick access to the justice system. Right? So that was recently in news, and it can be a potential question. Nyaya Sanyog is under the NALSA to, so NALSA is already to provide, free and competent legal services. But within that, new facility called Nyaya Sanyog, which is to provide assistance to poor litigants and the families of people who are in jail, right, under trials, who are languishing in jail, right. So that is with respect to NALSA. EC, there was a question on ECI last year, so I don't expect a question again this year, though the ECI has been in more news this year than it was last year, right. So that way, in terms of being in news, it has been continuously in news for the last 9 months, right, till the date leak, alleged date leak day before yesterday, right. So ECI, we will not go through again the entire, I have just listed it down, you can go through it, even for people who are from outside, it's basically from the constitution, right, article 324, but one thing which you should be aware of is that the expenditure of the election commission, the salaries and expenses of the chief election commissioner, that is the only constitutional authority which is not charged on the consolidated fund of India, right. So, so if there is a question, which of the following constitutional authorities is not charged on the consolidated fund of India, or which of the following authorities, right, and if it is some other, there are various authorities which are outside the constitution which are still charged, right. So if you find election commission there, the answer is election commission. So be clear about that, right. So that's not charged on the consolidated fund of India, but these are the various things that they do. Disqualification of members, there is a separate slide on that, so we will come to that when we discuss with the disqualification of members. So the next thing is municipal bonds. So these are, this was in the news because 94 cities across 14 states received credit ratings under Smart City Mission and Amrit Mission. The municipal bond regulations were released by SEBI in 2016. They enjoy a tax-free status. Any municipal corporation, in order to raise a municipal bond, so municipal bond is a way of raising finance, have to be investment grade, which means it has to be minimum BBB minus or above, which is the investment grade for any bond. The corporation must not have defaulted on any loans in the last 1 year. The corporation is required to maintain full asset cover to repay the principal amount. So there must be tangible asset cover based on which the municipal bonds can be raised. Not a very important issue, right, but still better to be aware of it because it has got to do with public finance of urban areas, right. So guys, again, just to reiterate rather, right, as a caveat, as a reiteration, whichever way you want to call it. So the idea of these sessions is to highlight the important topics, number 1. The idea of this session is to break it down into bullet points which can be asked in the UPSC, and the idea is also to tell you how to read, even the, when you revise also, how do you revise? Keeping in mind the potential question, don't read it like just a notes that you are reading. Anything that you read with respect to current affairs, anything that you read with even history, geography, anything that you read, you should read it keeping in mind the potential UPSC prelims question that can come out of this. And when you prepare like that, the chances of you not forgetting it is more. The reason why I am reiterating that is because, so this is all available in every online material. So I cannot invent current affairs, right? So current affairs is happening and everyone is capturing it. The idea is to pick which are the more important ones, not let you get, suddenly, not trying to, dump you with too much of information. The idea is to pick which ones are more important, and the idea is also to try and provide them in the form of bullet points which can be potentially asked. Clear? Right? So, so municipal bonds, these are the things. It is for cities which are covered under the Smart City and the Amrit Mission. It will be, the regulations were released by SEBI. They will enjoy tax-free status. You need to have investment grade rating, and you need to have an asset cover in order to be able to repay the municipal bonds. National Commission for Backward Classes. So, this is not a constitutional body yet, right? But it is something which may be asked. Which of the following are constitutional bodies? There have been questions like that at least in 2 out of the last 5 years. So, we should be very clear which is a constitutional body, which is not a constitutional body. So, because this is in the news, it can be tested. You know, you can, they may ask you which of the following are constitutional bodies. And Interstate Council, National Commission for Backward Classes, or which of the following is not a constitutional body, right? Interstate Council, National Commission for Backward Classes, Scheduled Caste Commission, right, and Scheduled Tribe Commission. So then you shouldn't get confused between Interstate Council and National Commission for Backward Classes. Interstate Council is a constitutional body under Article 263. National Commission for Backward Classes is still only a statutory body. This law has been passed, this bill has been passed only in the Lok Sabha, it is pending in the Rajya Sabha, right? So, and as a thumb rule, right, have this always in mind. I know that I have listed down some of the salient features of some very important bills here, but as a thumb rule, UPSC does not ask questions on pending bills in the preliminary examination, right? So, don't break your head trying to go that PRI website, you read it for your mains. PRI website is not so important for prelims, right? I am making a statement with all responsibility. Always UPSC tests you about recent enactments, but I have listed down some of the very, very prominent talked about bills just in case, you know, UPSC turns a googly and, you know, asks something from a bill. They will ask you only from very important bill, not from an innocuous bill. But every bill which is recently in the news or which is tabled is important for the mains, because they may ask you to analyze that bill, which we will do separately later. But usually prelims examination, the questions are only from recently enacted enactments, which has got the assent of the President. Clear? But some of them, this National Commission for Backward Classes bill has been quite often in the news. The Interstate River Water Tribunal amendment, right? Because again, interstate river water dispute is a never-ending dispute in our country, right? So that is again in the news. So such bills alone I have listed here, but read them once, understand them, but don't spend too much time on them. Bills are not important for the prelims. That you should always have in mind, right? So this is a new article which is proposed, Article 338B. There will be one list. Right now, scheduled caste and scheduled tribes have one list throughout the country, whereas OBCs, you have a central list and a state list. That will go away. We will have only one list of OBCs, just like scheduled caste and scheduled tribes after this bill is proposed. Parliament to decide inclusion exclusion under Article 342A, and at present NCBC is only a statutory commission. It's a statutory body under the National Commission for Backward Classes Act of 1993, right? So that is about NCBC. So this was an enactment, the previous one was a bill, but this is an enactment, the Mental Health Care Act 2017. So this has been brought to harmonize the country's mental health laws to the UN Convention on Right of Persons with Disabilities, to which the country is a signatory. So again, technically the most, and that was a question which was asked 3-4 years back, but that time also it was asked because there was a similar enactment, right? So health is a state subject. But how did the Parliament get the right to legislate this act, Mental Health Act? Because by virtue of Article 253, if the government has, no, it's not the Rajya Sabha 2/3 majority, right? If the government has signed an international treaty, then notwithstanding which list an item belongs to, they have the right to, Parliament gets the right to enact on that matter. It is by virtue of that article that the Parliament has enacted this Mental Health Act, right? So, every person shall have right to access mental health care and treatment for mental health services funded by the appropriate government. Advance directives are those given by the mentally ill person regarding her treatment and who shall be her nominated representative. There will also be central and state mental health authority. They will register, supervise and maintain a register of all mental health establishment, develop quality and service provision norms for such establishment, maintain a list of mental health professionals, train law enforcement officials and mental health professionals on the provisions of the Act, receive complaints about deficiency in provisions of the services, and advise the government relating to matters on mental health. So, these are, these are not so important points, right? But the first three, consider the following statements with respect to central and state, mental health authorities which are constituted under the Mental Health Care Act 2007, right? So, this, I mean, you don't have to, the analysis whether Mental Health Act, Mental Health Care Act is good or not, there's an analysis, right, which you already done for the 2017 mains, it didn't come, maybe again for the 2018 mains we'll again repeat it, because there are issues surrounding this, right. So, there are two types of guardians which has been objected to by activists who, so, but those are things which you can learn after June 3rd, right. Right now, you should ensure that you are thorough with the salient features of the Act which may be asked. So, I am not saying it is just rote learning, right, rote learning, just trying to, but you need to memorize certain things so that you are able to recall. And our aim is to try and provide it as much lucid as possible, right. So, these are the various bullet points. I am just reading it out from here because this is all that you need to know for the prelims. That these are the salient features of this authorities, central and state authorities which are constituted under the Mental Health Care Act of 2017. They have the right to supervise all mental health establishment, they have the right to develop quality, or they are supposed to develop quality and service provision norms for such establishment, maintain a register of mental health professionals. So, these 3 points are not so important, but the first 3 points are important with respect to the central and the state authorities under the Mental Health Care Act of 2017. Suicide is decriminalized as per this act. They will be treated as mentally ill person because earlier it was a criminal offence under the IPC, right. And there is a mental health review commission. I have just given it as a notes. I am not going through it here. I mean, this is just as a, just to be on the safe side kind of notes, because if at all if there is a question on Mental Health Care Act, it will be till the first central and state authorities. They are not going to ask you about the Mental Health Review Commission, but still, you can just go through it once and be aware of it, right. But this area is not so important, right. What is important is, what is Mental Health Care Act and what are the important functions of the central and the state authorities under the Mental Health Care Act. So, right to privacy, these are just straightforward bullet points, right, which are directly picked from the Constitution. So, just like last year, right to vote and right to get elected, what kind of right it is, right? It was a legal right because that was what was declared by the Rajwala case in 2015. So, if a similar question has to come this year, the most simplest of question, which I am sure none in this room or anyone who is watching online will make a mistake, is right to privacy is what kind of right? It's a common law right, it's a statutory right, it's a natural right, it's a fundamental right. Right, so it's a fundamental right, which is what the recent Supreme Court judgment has said. Now, the other question which can be asked, which again you shouldn't make a mistake on, is right to privacy has been classified as a fundamental right under which article? Right? It is under right to liberty. So, right to privacy has not been classified as a fundamental right under any of the other articles. It has been classified under Article 21 under right to liberty. Right? So, these are the 2 points that you should be aware of. It's a very, it's a long judgment. It has been, it's a consensus judgment of 9 judges of the Supreme Court. Right? So, but analysis of the Right to Privacy Act and how it can affect Aadhaar and all those things is again a mains question. Right? And that Aadhaar case hearing is also happening now. So, I don't know whether the hearing is over and judgment is reserved, or hearing itself is happening now. Right? So, we will get to know what they decide on Aadhaar. I am sure it will be out by June max. So, before your mains examination, that may be a very important question. We will analyze that as and when it comes. Right now, we should be very clear that right to privacy is now a fundamental right, and it has been classified as a fundamental right under right to liberty, right to life and liberty under Article 21, which we should be clear about. Right? Article 35A, so this is again was in the news quite a bit, right? So, it is a separate article which has been added for the state of Jammu and Kashmir, right? So, what are the salient aspects about Article 35A which we should be aware of with respect to the preliminary examination point of view, right? First and foremost, it was added through a presidential order. Now, this is what has been constitutionally challenged in the Supreme Court. The constitutional validity itself, saying that you didn't amend it by Article 368, you just added it by a presidential order under Article 370. 370 only says that the existing provisions of the Constitution may be extended or amended to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. The contention of the petitioner is that you cannot create a new article. The contention, of course, the defense contention or the Jammu and Kashmir contention is that, because this is not an addition to the Indian Constitution at all. It's something which is applicable only to J&K. So that's something which the Supreme Court will decide. But what can be the question which can be asked in your prelims because of this? So 35A, consider the following statements with respect to Article 35A would be directly asked. And if it is asked, these are the points. One, it was done through an amendment under Article 368. This is a wrong statement. It was added through a presidential order in 1954. So what does it say? It empowers the state of Jammu and Kashmir legislature to define who shall be the permanent residents. Right? You don't have to bother who are permanent residents as per the Jammu and Kashmir Act. I think it is people who are born there or who have lived there for 10 years. But that is too much of detail. You don't have to worry about that. It gives the right to Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly to determine legislature, because it's a bicameral legislature. It gives the power to the legislature to determine who the permanent residents are, and no one can challenge on the ground of right to equality or the 19(1)(e) or 1(f) getting affected, because if that permanent residents are given preference for education, employment in the state, and holding and transferring immovable property in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So for education within the state, by the state, for employment with the state, for owning and transferring immovable properties within the state, there can be special privileges which can be created for permanent residents as identified by the state legislature of Jammu and Kashmir. And Article 35A protects this for the state of Jammu and Kashmir by saying that no one can challenge any law or any privilege which is provided by the state of Jammu and Kashmir to its permanent residents on the ground that it violates their fundamental right, which means non-permanent residents, which means all other citizens of India who are not permanent residents of Jammu and Kashmir, cannot challenge it on the grounds that it violates right to equality or on the ground that it violates Article 19(1)(d) or 1(e), right, which is right to travel freely throughout the territory of India, or right to settle down in any part of territory of India. Clear? Right? So, but these are some issues. Again, these points have been added here just for reference, not important from a preliminary examination point of view, right? So a woman, permanent resident woman, also if she marries a non-resident, she loses her right, right? So that's anti-women, so to speak, but that's a debatable issue which can be asked in the mains, not in the prelims, right? So from a prelims perspective, this is what you should be clear about with respect to Article 35A. Added through a presidential order, not through an amendment of under Article 368. It allows the state of Jammu and Kashmir to classify or to determine the criteria for permanent residence within that state, the state legislature of Jammu and Kashmir, and by virtue of identifying those permanent residents, it can provide special privileges in the matters of education, employment, and owning and transferring immobile properties. And the fourth is scholarships, actually. There are 4 matters. I didn't list the 4th one because that's not so important, but scholarships by the state. So these are the 4 matters on which there can be special treatment, right? So delimitation, not actually in the news, right? But there was some articles and there was a debate around it and all that stuff. So because 2001 census, on that basis, the territorial delimitation has already happened, right? The constituency delimitation has already happened based on 1971 census. So both of this will happen only after first census after 2026. So delimitation is not technically a very important event, but there was some debate in the national media on this some time back. So someone may pick it up. See, you have to ask a static question from the constitution, right? So how do you ask a static question out of 370 articles or 380 articles, right? So they try and pick up those articles which have had some linkage to something which has happened recently, right? If you see any UPSC question paper, except for very basic static questions that they may ask, which is directly, the question papers setters, whims and fancy, so to speak. He may just pick, okay, let me pick this article and ask a question. But otherwise, one thing which the UPSC tries to maintain consistently is to try and ask static portion also from those areas which have been in the news recently, be it polity, be it economy, So that is something, so that is why I keep saying when you read current affairs, don't just understand the current event. The current event which you are reading may not be asked at all, but a static portion relating to that current event may be asked. Be it geography, be it, Oki cyclone destroyed so much in Tamil Nadu, right? So they are not going to ask you what was the name of the cyclone which hit Kanyakumari, right? They are not going to ask you what was the loss because of, that is what you will read as current events, right? Oki hit, this is how it is named, and this is the extent of devastation. So when you read that article, you should think, okay, I mean, I'm not a geography person, but you would have been taught about how cyclones are formed or how depressions are formed, what is the season in which it is formed, what is, whether El Nino has an effect or not. So you should try and understand what are the static, you should try and think in your mind what are the static portion questions which may be asked because Oki is so much in the news, right? And even now when you are revising the current affairs, always do that with that. It's not just about reading the current event or the current international event. Clear? Right? So it could be as far-fetched, so to speak. The Iran-India ties may be in the news. They may ask you in a map question something, the country is nearby Iran, or which is the country which shares boundary with Iran. Right? So that is the kind of linkage that you should try and do while preparing, so that you have a fair chance of preempting what can be the questions from that current event. Right? So delimitation, we have seen this before. So it's creating the number of constituencies is also delimitation. Drawing the boundaries is also delimitation. Number of constituencies is based on 1971 census. drawing the boundaries has happened based on 2001 census. So this is done by a commission called as Delimitation Commission, which is set up by an act of the Parliament. And we have had 4 delimitation commissions till now, 1952, 62, 72 and 2002. And it's a high powered body which is headed usually by a judge or some eminent personality. And the report of the Delimitation Commission is only placed in the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies. They do not have the right to alter it. Clear? So this is just because it was in the news recently. Otherwise, Triple Talaq, again, more likely a mains question. Yeah, but this has been banned. One type of triple talaq, right? What is called as instant triple talaq, right? Or talaq-e-bidat, as it is called. There are 3 types of triple talaqs. The other 2 triple talaqs are not because they are as per the personal law, which is based on Quranic principles. So that is not something which has been gone into. But again, the polygamy and the nikah halala, as it's called, that's something again which the judges are going to take up. But we'll have to wait and see that, whether it passes that religious protection trust or whether it is against the right to equality against the woman. That is something which the court will rule, right? So the debate about it, the analysis about it, we will reserve it for the mains examination, right? Right now, it has been banned because it violates the right of Muslim women to equality under Article 14. That's the and right and liberty of Muslim women under Article 21. So that is how the instant triple talaq has been banned. Quite a bit in the news, but the bill, again, had it been enacted, maybe there could have been a question possibly out of it, but it has not been enacted, right? It has been passed in the Lok Sabha. One day it got passed in the Lok Sabha, the same day, the day it was introduced, it was passed. But now it is of course stuck in the Rajya Sabha. I don't think it is going to get passed anytime soon, not before your prelims examination. So it's not going to be an act before June 3rd. So it can wait till the mains. So analysis, right? So lot of it. So that is why I'm saying, please be discerning, right? You should be able to understand and now appreciate what is important from a preliminary examination point of view. So there will be long articles in online materials which will say that, oh, it's a civil contract, whether criminalization of a civil wrong is right or wrong. Should the imprisonment, I think culpable homicide not amounting to murder is also 3 years. Divorcing also, should it attract 3 years of imprisonment? Who will pay the maintenance if the estranged husband is put behind bars? Where will the divorced wife and the kid go and stand for maintenance? So these are issues that need to be debated, which the parliamentary committee is of course debating, which may be asked in your mains also. They do ask about contentious bills, what is your opinion? Of course, you cannot take a BJP stand or a Congress stand while writing your answer. You will have to give a balanced stand as to why a law may be important because it acts as a deterrent effect, but how perhaps, whether the punishment is reasonable or commensurate with the crime that has been committed, right? Even if you think that it's a criminal act, whether the punishment is appropriate, and what are the issues surrounding the maintenance being paid to the Muslim women in case this act goes through. And so there has to be a consensus on these social issues before the bill can be enacted. That's a mains answer. So don't spend your time, of course read it, understand it, but don't spend your time making notes on all these things now, right? You should be able to skip it because you know that, okay, you can mark it, saying that, okay, this page I have to come back to when I'm preparing for my mains, not important now. Clear? So always have that prelims bent of mind now for the last 2 months. When you're reading even a current affairs event, what is the possible question that can come in the preliminary examination because of this? Directly as a question of that event that I am studying, or what is the question that can come out of it as a static portion which is linked to the event that I am studying. And that is not applicable only to constitution and polity, it is applicable to environment, it is applicable to geography, right? it's applicable to science and technology, it's applicable to all the areas. Economy, clear? Right? So, this again is Article 340, linked to that backward classes commission, so not so important. Anti-defection law, this is what I talked about. So, there has been in Tamil Nadu there were 18 legislatures, right, who have been disqualified under the 10th schedule. 10th schedule was in news even in 2 years back in Arunachal and all that. The Aam Aadmi Party legislature's disqualification is because of Office of Profit, right? We have a slide for that as well, right? So, what is the constitutional provision with respect to anti-defection and 10th schedule? We have gone through this. So, just members of a political party, when he voluntarily resigns from the party or disobeyed the directives of party leadership with respect to a vote, when they don't vote according to the whip which has been issued to them, when he does not vote or abstains as per party's whip, however, if a member has taken permission or is condoned by the party within 15 days from such voting or abstention, the member shall not be disqualified. That's an exception. Otherwise, a member voluntarily resigning from a political party from which he was elected as a member or voting against the wishes of the party whip, both of them are valid grounds for disqualification, right? Independent members, if a member has been elected as an independent, she would be disqualified if he joined any political party, and nominated members who are not members of a party could choose to join a party within 6 months. If they join after 6 months, then that will be a ground for disqualification. So, that's what I am saying. So, if it is an anti-defection related question, one straightforward question which has been asked 2-3 years back is that which schedule deals with anti-defection, right? And so, 10th schedule was a straightforward answer. The other question which may be asked is with respect to the static portion. See, because anti-defection and disqualification has been so much in the news. First it happened with Tamil Nadu, right? Then it happened with Delhi, right? Of course, Delhi judgment has come. Tamil Nadu judgment is still awaited, right? But it's always been in the news, right? There was a Madhya Pradesh minister who was disqualified based on election commission recommendation, saying that he has not given a correct and fair account of the election expenditure because the paid news was not added to his election expenditure. So, the election commission recommended the governor to disqualify him from membership. So, disqualification of members has been so much often in the news in the last 1 year on 3-4 different occasions. So, which means you should be clear both about the 10th schedule and you should be clear about the grounds for disqualification, the Office of Profit, unsound mind, undischarged insolvent, citizenship or taking citizenship or voluntarily taking citizenship of some other country, or disqualification under any law made by the parliament. So, the president or the governor disqualifies in that instance, and they shall act as per the recommendation of the election commission in this regard. So, that is article 102(1). Article 102(2) is 10th schedule. So, both have happened in the last 1 year, right? So, you should be thorough with both. Clear? Right? So, that is with respect to independent members. These are exceptions. Of course, speaker or chairman can resign after they are elected. Merger can happen with some other party, but earlier it used to be 1/3, but now after 2003 it has been changed to 2/3. Right? So, only with 2/3 split it can be a merger. Public finance management system is a system which has been recently introduced by the central government to monitor all central sector schemes, right. So, what are the salient features of this public finance management system? It is a web-based software application developed and implemented by Office of Controller General of Accounts. Its coverage includes central sector and centrally sponsored scheme, as well as other expenditure including the Finance Commission grants. It acts as a financial management platform for government schemes, and it is further integrated with the core banking system and has an interface with 170 banks across the country, including the Reserve Bank of India. So, public finance management system, these are the salient features with respect to the PFMS, which was recently introduced by the central government for the purpose of monitoring the centrally sponsored schemes. So, this is a very, very outside chance of being asked, but you never know. There is no harm when you are preparing. The last 15-20 days you should only revise the things which you know really well. Right, so you shouldn't try and scout for new things and get confused and all that stuff. Last at least 10 days, you should revise whatever you already know well. Ensure that you're not making a mistake in those things which you feel that you know well. Right, go through the question papers which have been set in the academy, revise those answers for that, because we are going to have, you would have written 30 tests. So 30 tests would mean 3,000 questions. Right, out of those 3,000 questions, even if 15-20 questions come, then that's a great number. And you shouldn't end up making a mistake that you made in the class test in the UPSC Prelims also, right? That's criminal. So that you can avoid if you revise the papers once well, right? So these are the things that you should be doing last 1 week. But now, when you are picking up points, just go through things and just have it in your mind, right? And I keep telling this, but at the risk of repetition, I can again say, because there are also some online people who are watching this, that if you're going to attempt only 70 questions, then your chances of getting through to the mains is, good luck to you, right? It's going to be very, very difficult. By the same logic, if you attempt 90 questions also, again good luck to you, right? Because invariably when you do 70 questions, even if you get 55, even if you get 57 right, you would have scored 114, but your balance 13 wrong questions will reduce 8 marks, it will pull it down to 105. And out of 90 questions, even if you have got 65 right answers, you would be at 130, but your 25 wrong answers will pull it down by 15, 16 marks, and okay, if you get 65 right, that's a different matter. But if you get 60 right, 120, but minus 20 for 30 wrong answers, it will come down to 100. So neither 70 nor 90, right? Because if you have done only 70 questions and you are so confident that you will get 65 of them right? I have never come across a candidate in my life like that, right? So, and chances are that if someone knows 65 out of 70 answers, chances are that you will know 95 out of 100 answers, right? So, because that's the nature of the examination, right? So, the sweet spot is 80, 82 kind of questions, where you still get 60, 62 right, or 63, 60, 62 right, but still, for the negative markings, net you will be above 115, 116 range, or at least above 110 range, which can be considered a safe cutoff benchmark. It may vary from year to year, but at least to be on the safer side, right? So the chances are that if you're just at 70, you may have only 50 answers right, or 52, 53 answers right. So you will have to take that chance by intelligently guessing for 10 more questions, and that is when these kind of innocuous preparation may suddenly come in handy, because you might have read it somewhere and then you'll have to take a chance. At least if you're able to eliminate 2 choices, amongst the balanced 2 choices, you can take a chance. So that you try and push the total number of questions attempted to close to 80, and out of that, you know that you are definitely sure that 50 answers you know really well, but out of the balance 30, by virtue of probability, you will get 15 right and 15 wrong. So that means 65 right and 15 wrong will still end up net taking you above of 117, 118. Right? That's the most idealistic situation, but here and there if it goes also. So something between 78 to 82 is what I always suggest. Yeah? Because I know of candidates who have in enthusiasm gone and attempted 93, 94 questions and all. And there is no need to do that. Because it's not that you know all the 93 answers. Right? You know 60, 65 answers really well, attempt that, take a chance with 15 more questions where you feel you have a reasonable knowledge about that question and leave it there. The additional 15 questions that you attempt will only drag down your marks because of negative marking. Because the more the number over and above 80 you go, the more you are shooting in the dark. Right? So 60 questions, 65 questions, you may be really confident or at least reasonably confident. Maybe 50 questions, you will know 100% I got this right. 15 more questions, you will know that, yeah, I'm fairly certain that I got this right. Then you will have 15 more questions where you will say, okay, I don't know, but it should be between these two choices. I feel that this one may be right. So that makes it 80. After 80, you are just trying to take a guess. So don't do that. I mean, when I say 80, it's not strictly 80, maybe 82, 81, depending on the nature of the question paper and your level of comfort. But where you know that you have gone closer to 80, 82 questions and after that you are not sure about the answer that you are giving, don't attempt that question. And you should be smart in choosing which are the 82, right? So you can't do a guesswork of which you don't know, arrive at 82 and then leave out questions where you have 50-50 chance. Right, so that I can't teach you, you'll have to learn it yourself. Right, so that's why the first round you do the questions which you really know well, right, tick it off. When you are doing it itself, mark the second round questions which you are fairly confident as, let's say, 1A, because you mark everything as 2, then you will be searching for those questions where you are more confident than the others. So I always say this, even in my mentoring sessions I say this and I've told it in the class as well. So the ideal way to do it is that don't read the question paper fully first after getting it. I'm just giving some gyan apart from polity because these will be useful to you, I'm sure. So start answering the questions. If you have already known it very well, mark it, tick it on the side, right? Most important, don't think that I will mark everything in the question paper and in the last 15 minutes I will circle it in the OMR sheet, because then after 1 hour 45 minutes your score is 0, right? So that's not a good place to be in. Yeah. So practice it now. I would strongly advise against marking all the answers at the end. If someone of you is doing it, please change that practice. It's not a good practice. Right? Because then at the end of 1 hour 45 minutes of your examination, if something happens, if your score is 0 because you have not marked anything in the answer sheet. So that's not an advisable option at all. I mean, you shouldn't feel that, what if I get it wrong in marking and all that. No, you're practicing it for so long. I mean, it's just, don't get too worked up about it. It's just marking your answer, right? So wherever you know, that is where you know certainly well, those you will mark. Where you are fairly confident but you want to again take a look at the question, mark them with a separate coding, maybe 1A, that's what I say, 1, 1A, 2 and 3. 1 are certain questions which you would have finished in the first round result, so you don't have to mark them 1, you can just stick it on the side because you've already done it. When you're reading the question itself, you are fairly confident about it, but still you just want to have a second look at it. Don't spend your time too much on that question, mark it as 1A, right? So let's assume that you have covered 45 questions in the first round which you knew really well, or 50 questions. Then you may have 10 or 12 1A questions. So then in the second round when you are doing it, you will first search for 1As in your question paper and then finish that. Because there you know the answer more or less. You just wanted to have a look at it one more time before answering it. And then mark those questions which you are 50-50 as 2. Maybe there are 15 more questions like that. And you should leave it at that. Go through in the last 5 minutes what you have marked as 3, because 3 means you do not know that question at all. But still, if you want to finally, you have finished only 75 or 76, and you still feel that, 3-4 questions which I'm slightly hopeful about, I want to take a chance, that is based on the question paper on that day's performance. But that is how you should order your question paper, so that you are answering your best 80 or 82 questions, not the first 80 or 82 questions. Clear? And that is when these, I think I drifted completely to a different topic, but the idea was, these are the kind of new schemes, new things that have come about, which may not sound very important, but when you read it for the first time, don't ignore them. Just read it, try and mentally frame the points which may be asked from this, and then leave it at that. Because this may be helpful in your final guesswork for 2-3 questions, some questions like this, right? So coming back, the PFMS, Public Finance Management System, is developed and implemented by Office of CGA, includes central sector and centrally sponsored schemes, financial management platform, and it is integrated to the core banking system, right? There is a Bureau of Indian Standards Act of 2016. So recently the Bureau of Indian Standards Act 2016 was brought into force, which repealed the existing Bureau of Indian Standards Act of 1986. So what are the key features of the BIS Act of 2016? It establishes Bureau of Indian Standards as the national standards body to formulate, implement and certify certain standards of quality for goods, services, articles, processes and systems. So Bureau of Indian Standards is not just for goods, it is for goods, services, articles, processes and systems, right? So you shouldn't mark this statement as wrong, because you shouldn't be under the impression that BIS means only for goods and services. No, it is even for systems, it is even for processes, right, that BIS will be there. The Act allows the central government to notify certain goods, articles, etc., which will need to compulsorily carry a standard mark in the interest of public interest, safety of the environment, prevention of unfair trade practices, national security, etc. There is a provision for repair or recall, including product liability of the products bearing standard mark but not conforming to the relevant Indian standard. So it allows multiple types of simplified conformity assessment schemes, including self-declaration. Enabling provisions have been made for making hallmarking of precious metal articles mandatory. So there is a hallmark, right? You would have heard of it in gold and other precious metals. There is a hallmark which is as per the BIS standards, right? So that's the precious metals hallmark, and there are also provisions related to penalties in case of improper use of the Indian standard. So just to be on the safe side, everything related to the BIS Act has been put as a bullet point here, but even then it's still been, so to speak, brought into bullet points, right, which will be easy for you to revise. But within this, what are the most important things that we need to know? This and the hallmark, right? So it is not just applicable to goods and services. Bureau of Indian Standards will be the national standards authority for goods, services, articles, processes and systems. The central government can notify certain goods and articles which need to compulsorily carry a standard mark in the interest of public interest, safety of the environment, prevention of unfair trade practices, and enabling provisions have been made for making hallmark of precious metals and articles mandatory, right? So that is with respect to Bureau of Indian Standards Act of 2017. Interstate Council, it was recently, one of the committees of the Interstate Council was reconstituted, and I think after a long period, after a gap of 10 years or so, there was a meeting which was held, right? So even in the class when I take Interstate Council, I say that this is one of the most ineffective councils, right? So, but still the question could be, which of the following is a constitutional body? Which of the following is not a constitutional body, right? So, and it could be anything, right? So you should be clear about it. Niti Aayog is not a constitutional body, whereas Interstate Council is a constitutional body. National Commission, Scheduled Caste Commission is a constitutional body. Scheduled Tribe Commission is a constitutional body, whereas National Commission for Backward Classes It's not a constitutional body, it's a statutory body. And you're aware of other statutory bodies also, right? Like NHRC, CVC, National Commission for Women, right? And how they are appointed, what are the salient, most important salient features. Primarily with respect to appointment, there was a test itself which was held on those topics. Just be aware of it, just in case there's a question, right? So, this is just the summary of Article 263. So, interstate council can be established by the president. So, it was established finally in 1990, right? So, it is for disputes within the states, how can it be settled? Union or one or more states have a common interest and better coordination and policy with respect to that subject. So, its function is complementary. Of course, Article 131 original jurisdiction is a legal recourse, whereas interstate council is more a consultative process, right? It does not have a, interstate council does not have a legal authority to it. It's more a consultative body. Its recommendations are not binding on the states. It's recommendatory in nature, whereas 131 is the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, where any dispute between the union and the states or between two states can be heard only by the Supreme Court to the exclusion of all other courts in the country. Clear? Right? So, Finance Commission has been in the news. So, again, when you read about the Finance Commission, how many members, who is the chairman, not at all, I've still noted down here, but they will definitely not ask in UPSC who is the chairman of the 15th Finance Commission, right? So, they will ask you about Finance Commission, how many years, how it is constituted, who constitutes it, and something different about the terms of reference of the present Finance Commission, right? So, 280, it's a quasi-judicial body because it has the powers to call people and record their statements and that is why it is a quasi-judicial body. It's not that it only recommends to the president. Its recommendations are not binding on the government, but it's a quasi-judicial body because it has certain powers that the court has when doing its proceedings. Clear? Right? It is constituted by the president every 5 years. It is composed of a chairman and other members as appointed by the president. The constitution authorizes the parliament to determine the qualification of the commission and the manner in which they should be selected. So, what are the points which the Finance Commission recommends to the president? What are the areas about which the Finance Commission recommends? One is the principle that should govern the distribution of funds between the center and the states, which is what is called as vertical devolution, right, between the center and the states. The principle that should govern the distribution of funds within the states, which is what is called as the horizontal devolution, because how much for center, how much for all the states is vertical devolution. That principle will also be determined by the Finance Commission. Out of the state's amount or the amount earmarked for the states, how much will go to different states. That principle, and the principle that will govern the grants in aid under Article 275 from the center by the parliament to any state, and also the means for augmenting the revenues of the state and the panchayats. So, this is the terms of reference. These are the constitutional. So, no Finance Commission can be constituted without these, because the constitution says these are the things that the Finance Commission has to do. Such other matters as may be referred to by the president, right. So, there are some 2-3 additional things which have been given this time, you can just go through it. But one important change which has happened as against the previous Finance Commission is that the population will be now based on 2011 census, right. So, that is why there is a lot of hue and cry amongst the South Indian states, because it's like getting penalized for producing less, right. So, but again, to be fair, we'll have to wait and see, because there is going to be some weightage which is also going to be given for stabilization of the fertility rate, but we don't know how much that weightage is going to be. Out of 100% for population, if 90% is given for 2011 population and 10% for stabilization of fertility rate, then even then it's going to be a disadvantage for the southern states and the western states, right? So these are federal issues which will keep cropping up, but from a preliminary examination point of view, the fact that you should be aware of is that the population that will be considered for the 15th Finance Commission is the 2011 census and not the even in the 14th Finance Commission, the weightage was apportioned between 1971 and 2001 census. So it was not completely 1971 census, but if I remember right, 27.5% was the total population weightage, out of which 17.5% was for the 1971 census and 10% was for the 2001 census. All of you are following what I am saying? The 14th Finance Commission took a blended weightage for the population between 1971 and 2001 census. But in the 15th Finance Commission, it has been said it will be based on the 2011 population. So that's a fact that you should be aware of. Clear? And what are the constitutional provisions? What are the terms of reference which, as per the Constitution, the Finance Commission has to do? Clear? And the fact that it is constituted by the President, it will be constituted once every 5 years. So whatever this Finance Commission does and submits its report, it will be for the period 2020 to 2025. Clear? Right? So that is with respect to the Finance Commission. The next is Northeastern Industrial and Promotion Policy. So here the Union Cabinet approved an introduction of a new central sector scheme, which is called the Northeast Special Infrastructure Development Scheme from 2017-18. So the NEIPP was launched in 2007. Now it covers the entire northeastern region and comprises of the following benefits: Central Capital Investment Subsidy, Central Interest Subsidy Scheme, Central Comprehensive Insurance Scheme, Excise Duty Exemption, and 100% income tax exemption for 10 years. So the Northeastern Special Infrastructure Development Scheme is again a reiteration of the Northeastern Industrial Promotion Policy, which was recently launched in 2017-18. Yeah, so Namami Gange program, right? This again has been in the news. Clean Ganga, Green Ganga, right? So it's easier said than done, right? And that we are seeing, quite difficult considering the population and the pressure that any river source has. But it aims to make more than 1,600 panchayats on the banks of Ganga open defecation free. Focus is on Aviral Dhara, which is uninterrupted flow, and Nirmal Dhara, which is clean flow, and it focuses on pollution abatement interventions, namely interception, diversion and treatment of wastewater through open drains, which can be through appropriate in situ treatment, which is on the place where the drainage happens, use of innovative technologies, sewage treatment plants which can be set up on the banks, effluent treatment plants which can again be set up on the plants, rehabilitation and augmentation of existing sewage treatment plants, and immediate short-term measures for arresting pollution at exit points on the river. So Namami Gange project recently in the news was reiteration of this, the uninterrupted flow and the Nirmal Dhara, which is the clean flow. It primarily aims at making 1,600 panchayats at the bank of Ganga open defecation free, and it focuses on pollution abatement through these interventions, right? So that is with respect to Namami Gange project. So we'll take a break here. We'll do something about 15-20 minutes, and we'll go through another 15 to 18 topics and close for the day. Tomorrow we will continue with few more topics, and then for the benefit of our online candidates and for the people who are outside our academy who come here, the conceptual points which most of the in-house candidates would have gone through. No harm if you want to sit again and go through it one more time. Some of the conceptual points which are important from the prelims examination point of view, considering the way the questions are asked last year, that we will revise and close it. Yeah? Thank you.